I got to smile because I'm on camera. Okay. Let me introduce to you our wonderful speaker. He is coming to us for the third time. We are so excited for Chris Heimerl. He is out of Arizona, and he, in addition to being a super warm person that I have just come to really have a wonderful friendship with, he's a person who really wants parents and kids to succeed together. He has a master's degree in social welfare. He did I'm making up words, people. He did extensive postgraduate training in family therapy and substance abuse. He has over 45 years of experience, primarily in the area of intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental health. He's also a dad of a child with a variety of complex and challenging developmental needs. His first child, Nicholas, was born in '80 and died shortly before his 7th birthday. He's now proud papa to Nico, Isla, and Zoe, his sweet grandkids, which is a huge blessing because he gets to spend time with them, and he'll let you know. That's affectionately his lunatics. I'll let him explain that. He's retired as the Positive Approaches consultant for the state of New Mexico. Oh, did I say where did I say earlier? I said Arizona. I'm so sorry.
All right.
New Mexico.
Close.
Albuquerque's in New Mexico. I did not get hired for my geography skills, people.
New Mexico.
Anyway,
it is neither new nor is it Mexico.
Okay, and he has done 2 other talks for us, and I'll be popping those links in the chat box. If you did not get to see those 2 talks, they are amazing. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Michelle. And I have, to start, I have a confession, a request, and a prediction that I'd like to start with. And so the confession is I read the little thing that Michelle had on her screen as we were all waiting, saying that present your questions in the chat box, and Chris will answer as many of them as he can in an hour. I know the answer to that. The confession is 0. What I have learned in the last few months about chromosome 18 is about 100 times more than I knew 6 months ago, and it still leaves me knowing absolutely nothing about any one of your children. I don't know that I know of, I mean, all kids obviously are very unique with their own attributes and gifts and liabilities and all that kind of stuff. And then you get this label attached to some kids. And sometimes that label is maybe fair or not. At least it's kind of a head start of, I kind of know what I'm getting into here. And the more I read about chromosome 18, it was, oh no, you don't. Not for any particular child. If you meet 10 kids with chromosome 18, you know about 10 kids with chromosome 18. You still don't know much about chromosome 18 because the 11th child isn't going to look anything like those 10 that came before. So that's my confession. I think I probably unlikely. So my request is that we all kind of share ideas about this stuff, because you guys collectively know an awful lot more than I do, kind of singularly. Even though this is what I've devoted myself to for my career, I get that when it comes to any particular child in any family, I really don't know much of anything. I mean, I look at my kids and I have a hard time believing they came from the same parents. And then I look at my grandkids, and as Michelle said, 2 of them, their last name is Luna. And so I call them the lunatics. It's hard for me to believe they came from the same species. I mean, these 2 are so different, and they don't have this overlay of another label that says, yeah, here's a kid with some differences that are, more significant than we think about. Now to my prediction. If I were to predict the question that is most pressing on all of your minds, it's how do we survive the COVID with our kids? We don't have a routine anymore. We don't have school. You really think my child is going to sit in front of a Zoom screen all day for school? Not going to happen. Therapies are gone. Our therapists are now either not available at all, which I run into quite a bit, or it's by Zoom, and everybody agrees, well, this really isn't the best way to go about doing this. Even just as one example, my wife is a pediatric physical therapist. She specializes in the area of infantile autism and cerebral palsy. And she spends her day on Zoom, and what she hears over and over and over is, this barely works for me as an adult. It does not work at all for my child. And the therapists are saying the same thing. I need my hands on the children. I need my guts to sort of sense and feel who they are and where they're coming from and all those things that I simply can't get from a screen. So if that's not the most pressing question, we'll move away from it. But I am really curious how people are kind of addressing that with their kids, how you're trying to establish new routines, new kind of benchmarks. If nothing else, one of the things that many families have requested that I help them with is, how do I just simply help my child mark time so that they have any idea what day of the week it is? So that Saturday doesn't look like Wednesday, and it doesn't look like Sunday, and it doesn't look like Tuesday. How do I do that when all of those guideposts and markers are gone for us? I feel adrift. How do I kind of establish and maintain a point of stability and reference and familiarity for my child? Does that sound like a familiar thing that you're?
Most of everybody's muted, so they were nodding their heads.
Okay. Oh, good. So yeah, if you have suggestions and ideas about that, please unmute and throw them in. Or if there are other questions that are more pressing for you, we can certainly move on to those. But I've already
Liz popped into the chat box that they tell their daughter Charlotte that the whole world is sick.
Yes.
People are hesitant to talk because they'll be on the recording. Remember,
Yeah, okay.
I gave that little disclaimer.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So the two things that I've kind of been resting on with this, one is just what you said, is to tell the child as much sort of the truth as you can, that there is this virus, or you can call it whatever you want, a sickness, whatever. And it's out there, and everybody can possibly get it. And you can get really, really sick. You can get not very sick at all, depending upon the age of the child. I think it's perfectly okay to say, and some people are going to pass away from this. There are people that are going to die. And then you don't make a big deal of it. I'm just thinking, for example, how we've dealt with it with 3-year-old Nico. And he can now talk to you and tell you why he wears a mask. And plus he likes it because it's Paw Patrol and Thomas the Tank or the Train or whatever Thomas is, all those kinds of things. But that the other piece of it is helping them understand that you're kind of in this together, and this is new stuff for you and new stuff for them, and to be really honest with them when you're at a loss. I mean, there is something reassuring. It doesn't freak kids out to hear their parents are at a loss. They know that. They sense that, they feel that. And to be honest, to say, I'm just trying to figure this out, kids. You know, give me a break here. Or the most unlikely source, that if you have a child that has some sort of cogitation about this and has the capacity to articulate anything about that, to stay in touch with what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're believing about things, because you don't want it to drift into something that's petrifying them and having them live in fear, like many of us are. But on the other hand, you want them to know that, yep, this is new and different for all of us, and we're kind of trying to figure this out together. I'm just curious, and you can put this in the chat room. I understand people's reluctance to speak. Have you noticed changes in your children with respect to their either emotional range, their emotional stability, and then how that would present itself or represent itself behaviorally? Have you seen changes over the last few months that are unexpected, unpredictable, novel, whatever that might be?
Hi, Chris. This is Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Thank you so much for doing this for our group. And I do have a daughter who she's been at home since, my daughter and son have been at home since last March.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Because my daughter is immunocompromised, and my mother, who's in her 80s, lives with us. And so we've all just been hunkered down for a long time. And my daughter is just, she's the one with chromosome 18. She's got tetrasome 18p. And she's really she does talk, and she has been saying how much she misses school now and how
Yep.
much she misses her friends, and that she's really getting lonely, and that she'd really like to have play dates, and that she'd really, and I'm definitely hearing that more than I
Yep.
did in the summer, in the fall. And we have people that come, we have a horse farm, and we have people that come and we have outside stuff, but she's really missing interactions with friends her own
Oh,
age.
yeah.
So I am
How old
hearing
is she?
more and more. She's 9.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Yep.
And so she's really missing it. And we don't, she doesn't really get to obviously play with many kids. There's a few kids that are also home who are also in bubbles that are kind of in their germ bubble. And we kind of let them play outside, but winter's hard because they can't even do that. So it's been challenging. She's definitely vocalizing more her loneliness and wanting to see friends.
And have you found ways of addressing that are not satisfying for, but at least somewhat comforting?
So we FaceTime. So we have to reach out and we FaceTime. We let her have those interactions. And I actually just give her the phone and let her go off on her own and have the interaction she's going to have, which usually means she hangs up on the person at least a half a dozen times. But then they seem to call each other back. But she needs that. And she's almost needing it more and more. She needs it more and more. So, and just interacting with her family is not enough.
I absolutely agree. And I'm wondering if not only for your kids, but for yourselves, rather than sort of acclimating to this and adapting to it, it seems like my need is increasing, not decreasing. I really hope that over time we would find our own new rhythms and routines and all that kind of stuff, and we would find ways of sort of satisfying that social need and yearning that we all have. And what I'm finding, at least personally, is no. And just as one example, I now have more contact with my brother and 3 sisters than I have for 50 years, because every Sunday we're in house party together. And for some of them, it may have been years since I had much contact with them, especially, when I abandoned the family and moved from the Midwest and started wandering around the desert of New Mexico. But that has not kind of satisfied that stuff for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. I know, Michelle, there was a question in that we could get to from one of the members, and I think it's a pretty universal question.
Yeah, we actually have a pre-submitted question. That's the first one, and I think I don't have the name connected to it right now. It might have been your question, Rachel. Did you submit a question, Rachel? No, it wasn't yours. Okay, well, the pre-submitted question that we had, my Google Doc doesn't give me the name attached to it right now, excuse me. But we had a question about a 10-year-old with 18 P minus. Said over the last few years, her behavior started to become very verbally combative. She tends to get stuck on a perceived wrong, not actually a wrong, and she'll yell, cry, slam doors, and scream at her siblings. And so this parent wants to know if CBT is something that could help, or if you have an opinion on what class of psych meds might be useful to her. She's already on Zoloft and a low dose of Abilify.
Okay. And by CBT, I'm assuming that's another kind of euphemism for some sort of structured behavioral approach, like ABA, cognitive behavioral therapy is what I'm wondering, if that's what it refers to.
That's what I was thinking it was, unless someone else on the call, because the only other thing about the question was it connected to psych meds? So that was it, but that's not any acronym for a psych med that I'm aware of, unless someone else is.
Yeah, well, the other thing I wondered about is if what they meant was CBD. If they're wondering the hemp-based, supposedly miraculous medicinal property kinds of things. So I'm not sure. And so the answer to that question with respect to both those things is maybe. Sometimes having an organized and kind of structured approach to a child's behavior can be very helpful to us as parents. I've not actually seen it be that effective with kids unless you catch a behavior really, really early in its presentation. Like in the first really 5 to 10 times, then you're going to have some impact on it. What I have found otherwise, when it's a more entrenched kind of thing and the child not only uses it to discharge and express emotion, but they've learned to functionally use it. Oh, this is pretty powerful stuff. If I understand my timing, if I pitch a fit right now, I can get things to go my way. Because mom and dad right now just don't have the patience to deal with me. And kids are smart about that. They understand how to use their behavior. Then it's been less successful. Instead, because the emotional drive behind it and whatever adaptive functional thing that behavior is satisfying, the kid simply finds another way of satisfying that. And very, very rarely do they come up independently with something more constructive. So if the behavioral support is geared toward, let's find an alternative for this child and really go after that, as opposed to let's try to diminish or eliminate this behavior. That's the part that I just have not, in my 45 years, seen a whole lot that I would hang my hat on for any sort of length of time. Because as soon as you start to back away from some of the really structured stuff, things tend to get disorganized and collapse again. And you just can't sustain it for any length of time, or at least I've not met people that can sustain that. Even people who are sort of being paid to do that, not parents who have a gazillion other things they have to think about with their child. My answer is also the same with CBD. I both with medical cannabis and with CBD, I've seen some pretty amazing things happen, especially if the behavior is in at least a significant way contributed to by anxiety. If the child is anxious about a lot of things, or if lots of things can kind of press the disorganization button on the child, and you can sort of see them starting to fall apart a little bit in how they kind of understand what's going on around them and their ability to interact with it. That has had some pretty remarkable things. Now, I get that it's not available to everybody, and not everybody has access to that. And I really encourage people to not do that independently, even though those people that do have access to it in the states where it's either available medicinally or commercially, I would work with somebody who kind of really knows what they're doing, as opposed to experimenting with it. I've just seen much better luck when there is a practitioner somewhere in the picture that has prior experience and kind of guide you as a parent. That would also obviously go for any kind of behavioral stuff too. Somebody that is keeping their eye on how you're doing and how the child is doing with it, and shifts very quickly if you're not getting the kinds of outcomes that you're looking for. Age 10, and there's been a ramp up to this sort of stuff. Maybe in some ways a unique presentation of fairly typical developmental stuff, especially if the 9-year-old in some ways is being passed or left out of, or not able to participate in other things that their brothers and sisters can. That it's this sort of pre-adolescent age where I have seen kids start to not articulate, but to express their frustration or whatever it is that they're sensing or feeling about that. And they do start going after their brothers and sisters who either have more or get more, or whatever it is that they perceive, which actually just reminded me of a story I hadn't thought about for many, many years. And I'll be very quick about it. This was back when I was in Wisconsin, and I had a friend, a colleague in the field. She worked in the field, but she also was a sister, and she had a brother. I don't remember what his issues were, but her dad was the superintendent of schools. And when her younger brothers started to go to school, and they started talking about special education and special ed this and special ed that, she apparently went home and threw a fit about why she had been going to school for so long and she never gets anything special. Why does her brother, who by the way is a fill in the blank, gets to have this special education, and you're the superintendent, for crying out loud? And apparently they had a pretty rough time trying to explain to her that, this special ed might not really be that special in general. It certainly wouldn't be special for you. You'd last about a minute, and then you would have had it.
So Chris,
Yeah.
to interrupt, brief, but on the same vein, so potentially for this child that might be, and I have seen that, like sometimes, we have our kids and we've put them in this box of they are developmentally delayed and they're different, and yet they actually have some very natural and typical developmental things going on at the same time.
Yes.
So with this particular child that's starting to act out, and I'm not going to say that mine doesn't do the same thing on occasion, she's 9. If you, and I know my daughter, even though like it, you may feel like we all know, like our child might pretend they don't understand, but we know they know everything that we're talking about, whether, like some, like a parent knows exactly how much they understand or don't understand.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, and I'm almost like thinking out loud for myself. Like if I tell my daughter, who right now likes to bug her brother, listen, we'll do something special. I'm going to do something special with you. But if you are mean or nasty or bang down doors and act destructive, we can't do that. But let's go do something special. Let's have that moment, maybe fill a need that they have.
And it's like you're reading my mind.
Oh, good.
Because the next thing I was going to go to is you can structure, quote, behavioral interventions and stuff in the moment that don't have, they're almost exactly what you're talking about, Liz. But here's what I would do with them is rather than just putting it out there, we're going to do something special, I would have a small menu and say, here are 3 things, or again, depending on your child, it might be 2 things, and it may be just 1 thing. Here's something I would like to do with you. And you put that out there first, exactly what that is. You get the child excited about it, you get them invested in it, and then you attach the string to it and that contingency. You don't do if this, then that. If you behave, you're gonna have this special thing. Don't do it. Say, you're gonna have this special thing if you behave. And it's way more powerful because now the outcome is the power struggle, not the behavior. It's not will I or will I not engage in this behavior or stop engaging it. It's will I or will I not get to go to Dairy Queen? And you just keep coming back to that. The second part of it is the if this, then that. I never make the if this around the problem behavior. So I don't say, if you're nice to your brother, and I don't say if you don't bug your brother and pick on your brother and if you're nice. I instead think about how can I reframe that into, if I see you being kind to your brother, if I see you sharing, if you're being a good listener with me, so I put all the things that I've already been over and over and over kind of hammering with the child of what my expectations are. Then this happens. But then I go back to it happens when you act this way. And if they start to go south, I don't say anything about, wait a minute, now you're not doing the being kind and sharing and all that kind of stuff. I just get puzzled and say, wow, I don't understand. I really wanted to go to Dairy Queen. And I don't understand why you're giving it up and why you don't want it as much as I do or as much as I thought you do. And then you'll get the child to object. There is something really potent about putting the child in charge. And it's something that I've used with my kids who don't have any kind of cognitive or developmental issues up until the time they left home. That's how I hooked contingencies. So Anna, you want the car Friday night? And I knew she did because she always was a designated driver. She is death on drinking and driving. So her friends were always happy to have her be and we had a station wagon or else a minivan, one or the other. Who are you going to go with? What are you going to do? I'd make her flesh it out into this total picture of Friday night. And I would say, great. I want to be able to see your floor. Oh, it's my room. Da, da, da. Yes, I understand that. I'm just telling you what I need. And she would complain until like Thursday morning about how I was simply just manipulating her behavior. She wasn't in control of whether she had the car, because by now I've said, you've changed your plans. Are there other plans for Friday that don't include the car? Clue me in. That's fine. Just kind of let me know these things. And as she would be complaining about how all I did was shift the semantics of, my expectation as she is cleaning her room and doing her laundry and all those kinds of things. And to this day, she'll talk about how, she does now the same thing with her kids. And if you keep them focused on the payoff, not the behavior, the power struggle becomes a double bind for that child. It's, well, wait a minute. Getting my way right now means not going to Dairy Queen. Going to Dairy Queen means I got to knock this off.
Yeah. So Chris,
yeah.
So reeling it back for a minute, back to our kids that aren't as neurotypical. And
Yep.
So awesome story. Love that. And if you want to hear more on that, Chris actually goes a lot into that in the menu video that I posted the link for you to. And there's some pictures and stuff in there about how to do treasure box and different layers of treasure box kind of a thing, whether you do an actual treasure box or a sort of metaphorical treasure box.
We just adapted Candyland.
Yes.
For he turned 4 yesterday, which is now a behavioral game. It is not, Princess Gumdrop, or I can't remember who the characters are. It is now turned into you move across the board by being a good listener, by being nice to your sister, by da-da-da-da-da, and along the board, instead of, whatever the little Candyland things where you can take a shortcut and do all those kinds of things, there are little payoffs. There are little special favors. There's 15 minutes of something on TV, Paw Patrol, because we don't have them watch very much TV. Although tonight we figured out that the 20-month-old knows how to turn on the TV and go through all.
Hey, Chris, I'm going to interrupt you because you told me to interrupt you, and
yes.
so I want to pull it back because we have a question from Amanda, and so we're going to steer away from the neurotypical again, and we're going to go. So Amanda's question kind of overlaps with the previous question, but there's some different nuances. So I'm going to read it to you. That their daughter just turned 7, but developmentally she's about 3-ish. Mostly nonverbal, but can communicate well expressively. She's having more and more tantrums, and they cannot take their eyes off of her. She'll empty the dresser, empty a bookshelf, destroy anything in her path if left to play on her own. When they try to discipline her, they will sit her on the steps for timeout, but she just laughs and laughs. Yeah. So they're struggling with how to teach her things that are not okay. She doesn't seem to understand, and they're exhausted. So I think there's two parts there.
Yeah. Oh my, hands full, it sounds like, Amanda. Just a couple of thoughts that occurred to me as Michelle was talking, is to, and I see, I'm assuming your husband or partner or somebody sort of in the background. Howdy, and welcome. Is for the two of you to kind of set your priorities for which of the behaviors are we most concerned about, and see if you can think about them less as specific behaviors and kind of more as how do they group together the following way. Which of the behaviors are distracting in that she can actually be doing something constructive and something you'd like her to be doing, but at the same time, she's also doing something else that's annoying or pulling you off task, or if she's got brothers and sisters, pulling them off task. And so you're kind of in a bind of boy, she's kind of doing what we want, but then there's this other thing going on. So what groups of behaviors sort of are there? The next groups, what are the ones that are actually disruptive? She cannot be doing what you'd like her to be doing, what she ought to be doing, and this at the same time. She has to stop one to start the other. And then now we're moving into where I would start targeting more priorities. I'm going to let the distracting stuff go for the time being. And this disruptive stuff I'm going to look at. And if any of it escalates to the next step where it's actually destructive, that she's going to get hurt, somebody's going to get hurt, something's going to get broken, those would be the ones in that sort of category that I would say, all right, we're going to go hard and heavy after these 2 or 3 or whatever those might be in that group. And then I would have a very simple strategy that the two of you join together on. That would begin with, and this is somewhat contrary to what I just said about not focusing on the problem behavior, because kids will find workarounds to it that are often very much worse, is that your first point of intervention is a very clear, a very firm no. And whether you're saying that I try to pair it with as many things as possible. No, stop. And so now I've got, kids running around telling their parents to stop, which is fine. That's a whole different problem to deal with. But if the kid is only hearing it around a handful of behaviors, it becomes more powerful. If they're hearing it a lot, it sort of, goes in one ear and out the other. And they'll not let you know that it's having any impact at all, especially since what you've already told me is that she's not going to give you time out. She is not going to let you see if or if not it bothers. If she's laughing through it, it may still be bothersome for her, but she's not going to give you that. It doesn't mean to abandon it. I would just look at where and how long. Usually a place that is not very appealing, whether it's a corner. Don't send kids to their room. I think that's and you're going to leave me alone for a half hour? Great. And as you've described, it sounds like you can't do that because then her room would be destroyed. You can't even sort of have it be a timeout right in front of you without having lots and lots of problems. So I would make them very brief, and you may have to be somewhat physical. You may have to sit with her in timeout initially and just sort of sit quietly with her and keep her contained for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then boom, you let her go. But that may be the unpleasant kind of aspect of it. You don't want to make it so punitive that the child is now becoming fearful and that sort of stuff, but you do want it to be something that they don't find attractive and they want to get out of it and they want to avoid it. But I save it for really unsafe behavior. As you get some traction around some of the bigger behaviors, the little ones sort of fall in place. And what you end up realizing is the littler ones, they're actually a whisper of the bigger ones. It's her sort of telling you, I'm heading here. I'm going in this direction for whatever reason. And if you can put your finger on what you believe to be the emotional motivation behind it, and then deal with that. Why is she angry? Why is she sad? Why is she afraid? Why, what is it that's got her kind of off kilter right now? And then address that as opposed to the behavior. Those would be starting points that I would kind of play around with it if you haven't. If you've already done all those kinds of things, now I'm going to turn it back to everybody else to see if they've got some thoughts or ideas.
Well, and I wondered, Amanda, if you wanted to pop in and give any kind of a specific example that Chris could address.
You want to type in?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I like what you're saying about prioritizing and picking the ones that are like unsafe and destructive, as those are the ones that you really need to try and stop. But the bigger piece, I think, is just her developmental understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And she just, like Amanda said in the text, she just laughs it off and thinks that everything's hilarious.
Yeah.
And we're saying stop and no.
Can I maybe weigh in here? This is Carol.
Hi, Carol.
My daughter Samantha has tetrasomy 18p and she's 34 now. So unfortunately, I have been through almost all of this already for years. And I will tell you, Amanda, Sammy went through this stage of being very destructive and difficult, probably when she was about the age of your daughter. And honestly, we just had to let her grow out of it. What we did do on the destructive part, and she did grow out of it, by the way, she did. I mean, not that she hasn't had other behavioral issues since then, which is one of the reasons I'm on this call, but on the destructive stuff, we basically Sammy-proofed her room. We took all the pictures and things off the wall. We took everything out that she could break or tear or rip. So it was basically her bed and bare walls. And to keep her from doing the destructive stuff. And we did actually, and Chris, maybe you think this is a bad idea, but we would send her to her room when she was being bad, knowing that her room was a safe place.
Given what you've done, no, that changes things.
And Sammy always has been a very social kid. And so she didn't like being away from everybody because she's so social. And so that was a real deterrent for her to be away from
it's a true timeout, because what timeout is supposed to be is a time away from the pleasing, reinforcing social aspect of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
That's what you're, yeah, that's what you're getting removed from. It's not, you know, just you're having to sit in the corner for the sake of sitting in the corner. It's because you don't have access to that thing that's more desirable, which, you know, in Tammy's case was other people. The only thing that I would have done differently is I've been a party to this of childproofing a particular room in the house that becomes the sensory room, the timeout room, a whole bunch of kinds of things like that, or the bedroom. But I've always made sure that however the kid, you know, kind of presented, whether it was ripping things up, whether it was breaking things, taking things apart, I made sure that there was stuff like that there that we didn't care about. So here was an example. This was a kid who in the middle of the night would get up and take things apart. Do you know how many parts there are in a TV? Even a solid state TV? Hundreds and thousands of little capacitors, and he could take apart a TV overnight. Now, could he ever put it back together? No, absolutely not. He also learned how to operate a chainsaw, which is a whole nother story. So what we would do is we would go on Saturdays. It became part of my work with this family is to go to garage sales and flea markets and stuff and buy cheap radios, TVs that didn't work. I was well known at every appliance repair shop in town because I got all of their TVs that couldn't be repaired and all that kind of stuff. And that's what was in his room available to him. And the kind of cool, well, what we ended up having to do in this case was, because this was also this little guy that we didn't want to let out of our sight very much, but, you know, the parents had to sleep, is finally cut the door in half and put in a Dutch door. And you know, the first thing, of course, Mom said is, oh, like that's going to stop him. He's just going to climb over the Dutch door. But we made a big deal out of it. I don't remember exactly what it was that he was fascinated by, but whether we made it a castle gate or something that you couldn't pass. But that allowed them to sort of be able to hear him somewhat, if need be, keep an eye on him. But he still had that space where he was sort of cut off from them for that period of time. But he still could get it out of his system by breaking stuff and taking stuff apart. Also for another family that their daughter broke stuff, and she was uncanny about what's breakable and what's not. You know, dishes, windows, all that kind of stuff. We actually cordoned off a little corner of their basement, which, you know, I moved to New Mexico, I was screwed because there are so few basements. We cordoned off a part with old blankets and stuff like that. Same thing, flea markets, garage sales on Saturdays. We went and found stuff that broke. And she had almost like a hazmat suit, that real durable nylon kind of thing. And we had goggles for her. And when we saw it coming, we saw those little whispers, and she's starting to get defiant. She's starting to not listen. We know where this is going. We'd say, let's go have a smash 'em up party. And we would. We'd stand in a little opening and we'd fling the dishes into the corner of the basement and break them. And just to fast forward, because this was years ago, do you know what her first job was? She worked in a recycling center, where we said, same thing, you got to dress from head to toe, and you can either just sort the glass, or you can break all of it you want. Just try to break the clear glass here, the green glass there, and the brown glass there. And she was this happy now, you know, late adolescent, young adult. And when I asked her, I said, oh, what happened? Why don't you break windows anymore? Why don't you break mom and dad's dishes anymore? Why don't you do any of that stuff? And she said, I don't get paid. Simple as that.
That's great. Christy Kane had something to add to the discussion. Go ahead, Christy. Did you want to pipe in?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of piggyback on what Carol mentioned about outgrowing it. We kind of went through a phase of Hardy sort of having these random behaviors, and we had asked his rehab medicine doctor about it, and he kind of explained it to us as that they are somewhat like typical behaviors, but we had to think of it in terms of where Hardy was developmentally. So even though he might have been 6 years old, he was kind of going through like the terrible twos at the time, because cognitively that's where he was. And so that really helped us to just kind of understand that this was not really something that was unexpected. It was happening at a different time and at an older age for Hardy, because behaviorally, cognitively, he was on a much younger level. And
So it
so
throws you.
yeah, so you see them as the age that they are, but actually they act and do things differently at a younger age. So we kind of also, and it also happened to be around the time when my other son, the younger brother, was kind of acting the same way. And so it was almost like Hardy was mimicking his younger brother, but they were on age development things. Like, this is what they do at this age. And so to Amanda's issue and concern is they do kind of tend to not necessarily grow out of it. They just develop differently, and they develop and get older where they do get out of those type of behaviors. And for us, things that worked with Hardy was just like, his iPad is his, saving grace. And so if he did something that we didn't approve of, or we had asked him to stop and he didn't do it, then I would sit with him. I would take his iPad from him and tell him, we don't do these things. You cannot have your iPad for, 5 minutes. And then if you ask nicely or whatever it was, we could give it back to him. And we did. So it wasn't like a long-term punishment for him, but it was kind of helping him understand these are behaviors we don't do.
Exactly. It drives home that I mean it. I'm serious about this.
Right.
Yeah,
And and then knowing in the back of my mind that, knowing, in the back, remembering that he might be 6 years old, but he really has the mentality currently of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, that helped us to keep that in perspective, that he's not just acting out. It really is a developmental thing for him.
And
so
it's a stage
I say that to help,
process.
that it is a moment in time that it happens, and they do kind of age out of it as they continue to develop and mature.
Yeah, and I think if I could add just a tiny bit to that.
Hi, sweetheart.
It's just exactly that. I think the part that's challenging even more so is that you've got, like you said, kind of a terrible 2 toddler in a 7-year-old body that can do things that a 2-year-old wouldn't normally be able to do. So there's even a higher risk because she can get into doors, she can get into things.
She can climb a bunk bed.
Right. And so that's the differential that makes it even more challenging, is that component.
And it's more complicated to try to understand, because even though, and Christy, thank you so much for stay focused on where is the child developmentally, and does any of this now make sense, kind of given that context or that perspective. But also, and I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry. Mr. Bailey.
Yeah, my name's David. Thanks.
Hi, David. As
Hello.
David said, not only physically are they more mature, they're also more able in other ways to kind of figure some things out and to be even naughtier and stuff like that. Is even though a child may be identified at being they function at this age level, remember that they've had, so let's say you've got a 6-year-old that they say functions at a level of a 3-year-old. That only means that their ability to organize the world and information about it, they've got the same toolbox as a 3-year-old, but they've got to practice it for 3 years since they got this toolbox. They're much more sophisticated and skilled with that toolbox than the 3-year-old is. And that's not just around behavior and emotional things, that's all things. And it gets really complicated because with our more kind of typically developing kids, we kind of have a sense of, well, at 3, they ought to hit 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. When we've got a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 34-year-old that has practiced engaging with the world with the toolbox of a 4 or 5-year-old, they don't look anything like a 4 or 5-year-old anymore, although that's still where they are in terms of their toolbox. But what they do with that is very, very different. You think about even a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, some families that really focus on this as opposed to families that focus on that. And 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds have tremendous capacity for learning. It's just that we only teach them things that 3-year-olds need to know. We don't start teaching them about things that 15-year-olds need to know, but a 15-year-old who has that toolbox of a 3-year-old, we're dealing with them on a much, much more sophisticated level. We just don't know what has become important for them at each of those milestones, because that's as unique and specific to the child as their developmental kinds of issues. So that keeping that conundrum in mind of, oh yeah, my child has the toolbox of a 3-year-old, but oh boy, they've been able to use those tools for a long time. They're much better at it. Like when they first got that hammer, everything was a nail. Now only I am. That's how skilled they've gotten.
And Chris, there was a second part to that question, and then we have one more question. The second part that I know you've addressed and is something very important to you is parents being exhausted.
Yes.
But before you touch on that, if that can be brief, and then the last question that we have for the night is Katie, and there's some overlapping about the disruptive behaviors of her daughter, but more specifically, the behaviors of Katie's daughter are targeted at people, pulling hair,
yeah.
Things like that, throwing things, yeah. Biting things. So you gave some great strategies for redirecting the smashing stuff. If you can touch on exhausted parents and then the
yes.
physical pulling and stuff.
Yeah, exhausted parents, good luck.
You have more to say on it than that. I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah. The very first, so I have here's sort of my ideas about exhausted parents, and is first of all, you don't have the luxury of just being parents. I'm sorry, and you already know this. You are expected to be speech and language therapists, PTs, OTs, behavioral experts and therapists, and case managers and financial managers and legal guardians and all these kinds of things. If those roles start to interfere with you just being mom and dad, take a step away from it and tell people, I can't do this full menu. I can't do everything all of you are saying that's essential that I do. It's just not. So help me prioritize, not unlike the behavioral stuff. What of these things do we really have to necessarily go after? What are these things that we can kind of let go for a week, a month, a day, an hour, so I can catch my breath? The second piece of that is that the first thing that I see go after your individual sort of resources and resiliency and that sort of stuff, the next casualty, marriage. Over and over and over again, what I see are couples, because they have to devote so much time and energy to that child, they lose sight of each other. And you become a colleague, you become a co-therapist, you become those things, and you forget about, oh my God, we fell in love at some point. Who are you now? And to not let go of, and to try to make that be as essential as any therapy you do for your child is that third entity. And because there's you, there's your partner, then there's the marriage. And the marriage has a personality, a life, an arc and a course. Try to keep it afloat. I try to tell parents, when you have a child that is demanding of your time and your energy and all of your personal resources like this, your marriage is not an airplane. The rest of us, we get to be on airplanes, and if the engine shut off, you can still glide for a while and then restart them. Your marriage is a helicopter. The engines go off for a second, that helicopter only goes in one direction, and that is straight to the ground for that sudden stop. So recognize that you are in a helicopter, and how do you keep those rotors turning? And it'll seem like a chore at times. You'll roll your eyes and say, I don't have the time and the energy for that. But to remember that it can be something as simple as, can we just sit and hold hands for 5 minutes so that we have that physical contact? Because the part that I'm leading to here is, the only thing that I know when we are at the end of our rope and we are exhausted and we have no more resources, the only thing that I know that kindles that is human contact. someone else touching us and holding us. Again, whether it's holding hands, whether it's, rolling in the sack, I don't know, but have physical contact with each other. Don't forget to hug. Don't forget to touch each other in passing. The power of human touch on us as other human beings, there's all sorts of neurochemical things that happen to us. There are physical things that happen to us. And guess what? All of those things are rejuvenating and pleasing. So that would be the second thing, is to keep sight of your marriage. Also, keep sight of yourself as an individual and be a little bit selfish at times. And if you can't do that, then be selfish for your partner and insist that they take care of themselves by, this, or by, go have a Zoom meeting with that girlfriend you haven't talked to in 2 or 3 months. I've got this, I've got.
That's for the wife.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not the husband.
Yeah. Don't be talking to your girlfriend if you're the husband. That's just nothing but problems with that I can see. So keep your marriage in sight, keep yourself as an individual in sight, and nurture those things, because that will be what you end up drawing for as you weather this out. And as Carol said, Tammy sort of outgrew this stuff, and then who was Hardy's mom?
Christy.
Yeah, as Christy said, same thing. We just kind of, rode the tiger and weathered the storm. No, they didn't. They did all kinds of things to give their children other ways of expressing themselves emotionally without realizing it and without making it an organized thing. But a lot of it was recognizing, yep, this is just one of those phases we are going through. We can't just stand back and let it go, because it'll take a life of its own. But we do understand that some of this is just simply going to take time, and there isn't a quick fix for it. There's maturity that has to happen. There's, maybe, outside help that has to be drawn in as a resource. But yeah, it is just simply going to take time. And it's interesting that a lot of what I was hearing sounded very developmental, just delayed. Here we are, terrible twos at age 7, and boy, are they big and strong, which, is better than terrible twos at 16. When they
and
really
then we wanted to get to Katie's question
Yep.
for the last question of the night. And we're so appreciative. And hers, if you'll recall, was about her daughter pulling hair and pushing
Yes.
and
Yeah.
physical
Yep.
aggression toward a person.
Yep. And boy,
How to
again,
redirect it.
without getting a look at and seeing it and understanding where does it happen, when does it happen, what are all the kind of the pragmatics of it, and if you're not really sure what that is, I would suggest that you start doing what's just called a very simple scatter plot. It's an XY, and on the X, the bottom horizontal thing can be time of day or day of the week, and the the Y-axis, depending upon if you've got day of the week, then it's time of the day. I used to make little symbols for what was the particular behavior, and that's what you do. You just draw that little symbol right there. And over time, some things occasionally emerge like, oh, this is interesting that it can occur anytime during the day, but over the last 2 months, we have this trend that it's really much more likely to happen sometime between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. So what is about 3 and 5 in the afternoon? So I would try to get a handle on the when and the where and the who. Do we have anything that would inform us about why might this be happening? The next thing that I try to do is
Chris, Katie's trying to give you some additional information. Go ahead, Katie.
So, we do know when it'll happen. Or when it happens most often. It's typically when like somebody leaves, like people that she really likes leave. And, we've tried multiple different things trying to, like talk her through it and that kind of thing, but then she'll just throw things. That's not as terrible. She also fights. She has a lot of medical things as well that go along with things that she has. We actually just had a hospitalization stay where we were trying to get a CT scan, and she bit me so hard she broke the skin, and I have a very large bruise on my arm now. I mean, it takes multiple people to get IVs placed in her. She does IV infusions, and they're actually, this will be the first time we do it this coming time. They're planning on giving her Valium to like try and knock her out a little bit, but she's fought through some of the sedation that they've attempted to do. I mean, she's incredibly strong and incredibly strong-willed, and it's traumatizing for everybody involved, not just her. And I know it's traumatizing for her for these medical things as well, but
that's what I was going to ask. Does she really understand what's going on and the importance of it? Or does she just think people are being mean?
Well, I mean, I don't know that she understands the importance of it. I mean, but you can see the anxiety as soon as we walk. She knows the rooms. Like she knows what an OR looks like, and she knows what the CT room looks like, and she knows what the MRI, so like she escalates before you even try and do anything. I mean, the IV thing, not as much. The IV thing is once she starts getting, I mean, no one likes getting an IV placed, but she's so incredibly strong as well. So it's very hard that we're afraid we're going to hurt her in trying to stop her from hurting people. So we're just really at a loss as to what to kind of do to try and help redirect her and help ease it for her as well, because I know it's traumatizing for her.
So just a couple of thoughts, and again, they may be things you've already tried and already done. For these extraordinary things, and I get that extraordinary to us and to me, but maybe not to you and not to oh gosh, no, I'm blanking on your daughter's name. Tell me your
Riley.
Riley. But they're extraordinary. I that's where, and I missed the part of the question, the very first question about my thoughts about psychotropic medication. For medical procedures is when I have sort of the most faith in and would be most likely to recommend using a medication. However, that said, I would not use it the first time we're going to go do an infusion or a scan. I would try it at an uneventful thing to see what impact, because too many kids that I've seen have a paradoxical response. So you give them a little bit of Valium, and for the rest of us, our central nervous system starts to go, no. I mean, this is why they are minor tranquilizers. Your entire nervous system starts to settle down and to calm down. You have kids that, it is like starting it on fire. That their equilibrium says, oh, no, don't do this. Don't lose contact. Don't lose sensorium. And you get a paradoxical response. I've seen the same thing with some kids with stimulants, that the idea is you sort of overload their central nervous system and it restores equilibrium by actually calming them down. And I've seen kids get knocked out on Benadryl. And we can't find something that is just going to rev them up enough to get things to calm down and not put them to sleep. So don't kind of try it or experiment it in that moment. When it's other stuff that you understand is more functional and more situational, she's mad because something is happening that she doesn't want to have happening, whether it's somebody leaving or a program ended or it's raining and you can't have a picnic. Well, of course that's your fault. Make it stop raining. And so, you're going to get the brunt of that. As much as possible, you try to keep what's going on between Riley and whoever she's being aggressive with, as opposed to you always inserting yourself as the one who intervenes. Now, you may have to.
It's me who she's aggressive with.
Yeah. So keeping it targeted toward you as opposed to letting it drift to others, you've already made this huge step that I'm sorry is a really important one. And for her to understand who is safe and kind of who can I kind of express this to and get this out of my system. Not good news for you. I fully understand that. What I would do if I were in your shoes and she is directing it toward me, there were a couple things. Number one is I would confirm what you believe to be her emotional state. And so you see her coming, you just try to sort of stop her in her tracks and not say, you know, don't hit me, don't pull me, is to say, I can see that you're mad. I understand. Thank you for letting me know you're mad. Let's, and then try to figure out something that is discharging and physical, but it doesn't include hurting you. Whether it's, you know, going for a really brisk walk, whether it's rolling around on the floor and wrestling, but not hurting, I would try to figure out some way to redirect that a little bit, as long as the attention stayed on me. As she started to calm, when it starts to run its course, even if it's because she's now just exhausted herself, let alone exhausting you, at some point circle back to the event and talk it through, even if you're not sure what she understands, even if she's not able to participate in that conversation because she doesn't have as many verbal skills. I would make the assumption that she understands more than you think that she does, and that, yes, indeed, as someone said, as a parent, you do kind of know what they understand, and not to underestimate that. I would simply walk her through how much better these things work when you're angry. The other piece that I would do is I would randomly be angry at times, not involving her, but knowing that she has her eyes on you and you have her full attention. I would get frustrated and angry about things on a somewhat regular basis, and then I would model. This is what I do. Oh, I am so mad I could just, and instead what I'm going to do is, and then I fill in the blank with, I go for a walk, I listen to music, something that the child can also do. And then I'll ask the child to help me. Can you help me not feel this way? What I would like from you. Now, all of a sudden, you've given this child this role as somebody who can actually take care of mom. Not only have mom take care of me and be my punching bag, but I have something else now that mom sees in me. And there's an implied message underneath that says, you're getting too old for this. I have other expectations of you. And I see us growing in our relationship where I am not just always going to be your punching bag and telling you what to do. Circle back when she's calm, walk through so when I see you get angry, I'm going to suggest that you, and then I fill in the blank. With anything that you kind of see, yep, this does seem to have a calming effect on her, or I've modeled it for myself. So you keep things really short and brief. Oh, I'm so upset right now. I'm going to, and 15 seconds later you say, oh, I feel so much better now. And it might be something as simple as, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm just falling apart. Somebody's got to give me a hug. And see if you can't get her now to be the one that is a bringer of affection for your emotion. And then you say, oh, I'd like to do that for you when you're angry. I would like to see if a hug works better than us having a fight, because you know what? That just isn't good for you. It isn't good for me. And I'm that blunt, and ask parents to be that blunt with their children about.
And this is the kind of strategy probably, Chris, over and over and over and over. And you're not going to think it's working, and you're not going to think it's working, and you're going to be exasperated, and eventually, hopefully,
as it becomes more automatic, it starts to have more of an impact, and you're not having to stop yourself and think your way through it. Same thing, sort of like how I set up the contingencies. You got to be good to get that. The flipping flopping of that, you practice that for a while, and it becomes automatic. The shift away from addressing the child's behavior and instead identifying, labeling, and addressing what you believe to be the emotion behind it. Again, same thing. It becomes automatic. You immediately interpret where the child is coming from emotionally. And you stop thinking about, well, what does this behavior mean? You now get, oh God, there's something really frightening for them right now. They can't wrap their head around. I kind of thought they could, and thought that they've been exposed to this enough times. Well, remember that for some of your kids, it may look like the same thing over and over and over again, and it's not for them. It is not the same thing over and over. Yeah. I think I may have mentioned this in one of my other things, that the first time that you engage with whether it's your child or somebody else in a major behavioral event, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What am I going to do? How is this going to end? How will this end? You're like pulling your hair out. The 100th time it happens, you're kind of rolling your eyes and saying, oh my God, here we go again. Yeah. Remember, for the child, each one of those may be a novel event because of how much emotional arousal they have. They might not be able to capture that, oh yeah, this has happened lots and lots and lots and lots of times. For them, it may still look and feel brand new. So yeah, you just need to repeat it and be really consistent over and over and over.
And on that note, Chris, we're going to need to wrap up because we're about 10 minutes over, and we could sit here and talk all night. But can everybody give Katie like a virtual hug? Oh my gosh, we need to give her some touch that's not painful. We love you, Katie, and thank you, Chris, for taking time to answer all of these questions.